I think what is rather regrettable as a point of departure would be the using the lives and the livelihoods of over 1 million students towards political gains and or some sort of a political game and political ploy, particularly from the Democratic Alliance, because the reality is that the impact that this is going to have is going to be on those students, the poorest of the poor. Look, there is no, you mentioned what has been happening in the portfolio committee, what has been witnessed by all South Africans, and I think we need to separate issues. There is an extent to which we need to recognize and evaluate the Department of Higher Education in terms of its work and its mandate, in terms of running the sector, but also its commitment towards the poor and the working class. And we must critically evaluate that. And in so doing, we must not then conflate, because you can do a performance assessment of the minister, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can go on to even appeal to the president, who has the constitutional prerogative to act in the event that you feel that she has not acted in the best interest of the department or the people that she's serving. But when you then use the lives of over 1 million students to bend the hand of the president, which, by the way, that decision and the actions of the president would be dictated by the Constitution, that becomes regrettable. I don't think there's anything wrong with anyone wanting there to be a level of accountability where they feel things have been done wrong. But when you do that at the expense of the poor, because the reality of the matter is that the issues that are being raised, albeit be important, by you not passing the budget, those issues are not going to suddenly disappear. If anything, you are going to exacerbate and multiply the problems that are in the sector. How is not passing a budget for over 1 million students different from when the Democratic Alliance said, no, we will pass the budget of the entire government so that life can go on and so that government can go on? So what, you would rather collapse a particular sector, but you say, no, you are committed to South Africans, and you did not want to collapse it by you, in fact, when they voted for the bill for the entire budget. So the point that I'm making is that it would become clear that the poverty of South Africa, because that budget, for the most part, if you look at out of the 137 billion, give or take, about 55 billion of that goes directly towards assisting students of the poor and the working class. So the reality is that it's unfortunate what we are seeing, and a lady here, and it will not in any way improve the livelihoods nor the conditions of the students. If anything, you can be sure that it's going to worsen them. And so I don't know what could be the motivation behind punishing the poor for what you believe should be a political decision that it must be made by the president.
Yeah, I want to zoom in a little bit on the minister, Nobuhle Nkabane, for a moment. You do have the Democratic Alliance having gone all the way to the police station this morning to file charges against the Higher Education Minister. That was today. But then this happened 2 days ago. The South African Student Congress called for the immediate removal of the Higher Education Minister, Nobuhle Nkabane, apologies. SASCO President Alungile Kamche has accused her department of failing to deliver on its basic mandate, and says the challenges plaguing the sector are due to poor governance. This is what he had to say.
The crisis facing students today is not incidental. It is the direct result of poor governance by the Department of Higher Education and Training, and the opportunistic, malicious, pro-bourgeoisie agenda by the university and college management. It is our contention that DHET, led by Minister Nobuhle Nkabane, within the Government of National Unity, has consistently failed to deliver on its most basic responsibilities, from the catastrophic delays in NSFAS disbursements to the flawed appointment of the boards of strategic entities meant to accelerate access to training and higher education. These failures also include the chronic underfunding of institutions that serve the children of the working class and poor. According to our observation and analysis, the current epoch in higher education is the beginning of a national crisis. It is such that we have no other choice but to call for the immediate removal of the Minister of Higher Education, Minister Nobuhle Nkabane.
Yeah, there you have it. Asive, the South African Students' Congress saying they'd like to see the removal of the minister. What is your view on that?
Look, our view, Naledi, we've decided that, number one, I think it goes back to what I had said before, that a performance assessment of the minister must be done, and to that extent, whatever is the outcome of that, the president must then act and decide what he's going to do. But some of the issues that were raised by SASCO are correct. But the reality is that there are structural issues and structural challenges that have plagued the sector for over a decade, some of them. So, look, so is Minister Nobuhle directly responsible for some of those structural challenges? Probably not. Has she contributed maybe to the exacerbation and maybe could not have done sufficiently to deal with some of them? Yes, to an extent that could be argued. I mean, I suppose if you look at the appointments of the Setas, the case in point, and so there are misgivings that all of us have. I mean, any person who says they do not have misgivings with how generally the ministry has conducted themselves in a number of events would be lying. But to say all of the issues, as the president of SASCO was mentioning, structural issues in the sector, that those are as a direct result of the inability of the leadership, or rather the lack thereof, of Dr. Nobuhle, that could be a little bit disingenuous. But I suppose that the most important thing is that an assessment must be done. And when we get to a conclusion that the work of the minister might not have been to the extent to which we believe it should be, to the extent to which it can stay on the portfolio, then the president must act, and to the extent to which there is belief that she has done sufficiently enough within the ministry, then obviously she would stay on. So, but what is dangerous, Naledi, that we must run away from? It is the personalization of the sector. This is, as I said, an over 100 billion rand sector with some serious structural challenges that have been there. When you make a single person either a target or a savior of the sector, you are going to have challenges. We don't think, and you can, by the way, remove the minister tomorrow, or she can stay on, but I can tell you that majority of the challenges that we are facing will most likely carry on to linger in the sector. So let that be done, a performance appraiser, but let's not make it about a particular person, the direction, the life, and really, the life of the sector, as it were.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I did think it stood out, though, that you had the South African Students' Congress calling for the removal of the minister. And then at the same time, you had the ANC Youth League, which is, also SASCO considering themselves an ANC-leaning student structure. The ANC Youth League coming out and saying that the calls for her to step down are a coordinated attack on the minister with political motives. So not standing with the view of SASCO, that being the ANC Youth League. But let's take calls on this issue. What does the future need to look like for the Department of Higher Learning, but also for the minister? Kushka's calling in from Mokopane. Kushka, good evening.
Good evening, Naledi, and the listeners at home.
Good evening. Thanks for calling. Talk to us, Kushka.
Yes, well, we have been assessing the minister since she took office. Some of the issues, some of the things that is happening are behind closed doors. Her behavior to the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Mr. Litsie, it's just one of the sins that shows that the minister is failing. Let us not politicize the matter. The education of our people is getting down. Our people are staying now in the shacks. NEFSAS is not being paid, but the behavior of the minister cannot be accepted by the South Africans now. The best position is for the ministers to step down and the president to take action against the minister immediately.
Interesting. Thank you so much for calling in, Kushka in Mokopane. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue speaking to our two guests and yourselves to be part of it. We're going to get into some of those structural challenges that both of our speakers have talked about. One analyst, William, Gumede having penned a piece recently saying, close incompetent and corrupt seaters and hand them to business for better results. We'll chat a bit about that on the other side of this. Welcome back. Well, we are getting into discussion around some of the structural challenges in the space of higher learning in South Africa. This is as the debate continues to brew on the future of the Higher Education Minister, Minister Nkabane. And of course, we're seeing various political parties being quite outspoken around rejecting her budget today in the NCOP, taking one or two calls. Billy is in Cape Town. Billy, good evening. Thanks for calling.
Good evening, Naledi. How are you?
I'm so well. Talk to us, Billy.
You know, if I can just make a comment, in my opinion, these experts that you always invite, these sits on the panel, they must get their facts right. They always turn it into a color or a political, but my comment is simple. Let's say, call a spade a spade. That minister should never have been there in the first place. We know they took Simelane or what out and they put her there. So they can put hundreds of billions of rands of budget. But if the person at the top is not there on merit, and it's unfortunate, so this is my point that I'm making. We got to go back to the grassroots level and stop referring to our people still living in shacks nonsense. We got to open up more academies in terms of training teachers. We got to increase the teachers ratio to 20 kids and one teacher, so that when they come to high school and they come to higher learning, then they're ready for this. And my point about that is, Naledi, Angie Motshega messed up this department.
That's
and
basic,
we know
yeah?
it's the politics that kept her there. I mean, they've just moved it to the Minister of Defense. She has no clue. So that's my point.
Okay.
As long as we continue with the cadre deployment and not putting people in the positions on merit, we will be debating this another 30 years.
Okay.
And the problem, the grassroots will still suffer, like myself, the people on the ground.
Billy, thank you so much for your thoughts. And of course, the distinction needs to be made between basic education and higher learning, two different departments. And you mentioned Minister Simelane, who in fact is now with human settlements having come out of justice. But those are just fact-checking issues. But we do appreciate your views. Let's take a look at a couple of WhatsApps that have come in from our viewers. Tamba says, good evening, Naledi. I don't blame the DA, EFF or MK Party for not supporting the minister's budget in the National Council of Provinces. The president must do the right thing and remove this arrogant and incompetent minister. Tamba, thank you so much for your thoughts. Abraham says, it seems Minister Nkabane is just clueless. Her arrogance may have adverse effect on needy students. Abraham Mothodze in Polokwane. Thank you so much for that. And Teboho Twabala says, hi, Naledi and lovely South Africa. Eddie Twabala there. Budget could have been passed and dealt directly with the minister. DA and other parties punishing the students and collapsing education by not doing what is right. Let's get some final thoughts. And I think that there's been a lot for you to respond to. I know that you're going to be having this discussion many, many more times, Mr. Litsia, but just your thoughts on this debate around whether or not to remove the minister, and if you think it's a worthwhile discussion. But I did want to get into this. Professor William Gumede has penned a piece just a few days ago, wherein he talks about how there are 21 seaters, training may be happening, but it is the wrong kind, it's misaligned. He says the boards of these seaters are usually political appointees with very little understanding. And then he goes on to say, hand them to business, that government is simply not understanding how to skill young people. What do you say to that?
No, thanks. I think Professor William Gumede is a serious person in society, and I think in this case, he honestly did not live up to the respect and the expectation you expect from him. And I'll tell you why. The statement that these Seta boards are run by politicians is not true. These Seta boards, they are regulated by legislation. And let's say, for an example, LG Seta, No, maybe let's do what? Energy and water seat. The legislation says there will be 5 people who come from business in that space, in the energy and water space. So there's 5 out of 14 or 15, 5 members who come directly from business. This is not, when we say people who are doing, we're talking big companies are sitting in these seats themselves. They have a direct influence on what kind of training should be taken out there to the public. So it's the other 5, according to the legislation, is labor. These are the workers in the same sector who are, so out of 15, you've got 10 members who come from the same. So Professor Gumede, I don't know who told him that, but he made a mistake. I suspect he will see it. I mean, it's just you can just check who was in the board of this particular city. You'll realize that there's business and all of that. But there's a point I wanted to respond to.
Sure.
I want to assure South Africans that on the 23rd of April, when we vote for the budget, we're going to pass that budget. Whether the DA is still angry about their golden boy being fired by the president, we know that MK and EFF are going to reject. They've done that all the time. The DA, if they support the budget, all well and good. They are saying they are not going to support it, but we know why. When you add those numbers, already out of 400, there are 184. They will still need about 17 more people. I don't know where they are going to get those people from. I can assure you now, as I'm speaking here, without necessarily sounding arrogant, the report will pass in the committee. And the budget will pass in the National Assembly. But those who are, and I think Asive made this point clearly, that those who are opposing this thing, who are opposing the budget, they are literally crying at the wrong funeral. Because if you are saying you have a problem with the minister, take it with the minister. The minister does not control this budget. By the way, I don't know how people, they think maybe the minister controls 151 billion of the department. It doesn't work like that. There's a processes there. If people have, personally, I have a problem with the structure of the budget, where majority, over almost 60% of this budget goes to universities, about 15% to TVET colleges, and so forth and so forth. I have a problem with that structure, which is what we're discussing and dealing with internally. But to say you don't pass the budget because you have a problem with this or that, it's childish to say the least. Thanks.
All right, some strong words there, but we're going to leave it. Sive, you've got about a minute I'm going to let you do this, actually, as we close it off. Your call to action to our lawmakers over this issue of the higher education budget.
No, let me start by condemning the professor, because he was very disingenuous to suggest that the majority of the budget for, as the chairperson would have said, of higher education goes to universities. There is consensus amongst all of us that majority of the graduates that have been produced by universities that have nothing to do with government, that have complete autonomy, they have been producing graduates that are unemployable. So the suggestion that the training that is done through the Setas leads to, there's a mismatch of skills, is rather a very silly one, because it's probably one of the only few trainings that are done within a work environment, unlike majority of qualifications that come from institutions of higher learning that are completely devoid of the needs of our society. So the professor there really might have been tired when he penned that. But on the issue of our call to lawmakers is that we appreciate that there are challenges. There are challenges in our democracy, there are challenges in government, there are challenges in society, there are challenges in the economy. But when we begin to use the poverty, the suffering of our people towards political ends and political gains, as we are seeing, as lawmakers are doing right now, mudslinging each other, using the livelihoods of the poor and the working class, that we must condemn.
Okay.
And we must say that they must put the interests of South Africans at front. The budget of that is going to be passed is not going to be at the helm of the minister to determine what happens. By the way, about, I think, give or take, about 40
I need
billion.
to wrap it up, Asive. Yeah, final thoughts. Go ahead. I'm giving another 20 seconds.
Yes, it will go to universities. About 15 billion, I might be mistaken, will go to TVET colleges. So the point that I'm making is that there are lives on the other end of this budget. Let us not use that, not only with this, with all other budgets that will be passed. Yes.
All right. Asive Dlanjwa, an absolute pleasure having you on the show with us. He is, of course, with the South African Union of Students. Thanks as well to Mr. Tebogo, Portfolio Chair for the Higher Education and Training Portfolio Committee. You're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition. We do have more news on the other side of this short break. Stay with us.